Aquarium and the editor of the Nautilus, a scientific journal about mollusks. Dr. Leal received his PhD in marine biology and fisheries from the University of Miami, and he was the assistant editor of the Sea Frontiers magazine and worked at both the Natural History Museum in Paris and the Smithsonian. Now, I asked José if I could tell you about a Sanibel documentary that he was in. And he said, "What documentary are you referring to?" He said, I have had so many show business performances lately. So I told him that it was the documentary Sanibel, All We Are Is Time and Pressure, that just premiered at the Naples Art Festival or whatever, the film festival. And anyway, he said that I could mention it. I reassured him that we would keep the paparazzi at bay, and he said he would show up in large dark sunglasses, which I didn't see you wearing those, Jose. But anyway, last year I introduced him as a TV personality because he was on the show Mollusks More Than a Shell on Changing Seas on PBS. This year, he's a movie star. And I think by next year, he'll probably come back with an Oscar and we won't be able to afford to have him come anymore. But anyway, Jose, welcome. We're glad you're here.
Thank you so much, Debbie. I promise you, when the time comes, I'll make an exception for the show. Do you want me to wear that? This one? Well, let's see the first slide here. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be back. I'll be discussing with you today the progress we've made in refurbishing the famous Great Hollow Shells at the Billy Matthews National Shell Museum and Aquarium. As most of you, if not all of you, know, back in September 2022, we were hit by Hurricane Ian, and the second floor in the museum, which is where the Great Hall is, was the area of the museum that was least affected by the damage inflicted by Ian. However, we did get damage in that there was water seeping from that cathedral ceiling down the walls, which quickly, like in 4 or 5 days, we had these big patches of black mold all over the place. So yes, it was necessary to redo the whole thing, including, part of the electric and air conditioning and all that. The interesting thing is that our executive director, Sam Ankerson, and myself, we've been discussing redoing the Great Hollow Shells prior to the hurricane. It was not as ambitious as it became after the hurricane. We didn't have the pressure, but it was in the works to bring the Great Hollow Shells to current standards. And you understand what I'm saying when you see some of the plans next. So we removed all the exhibits. We salvaged a lot of things. A lot of the shells that were in the old exhibits will be used in some of the new exhibits, not all of them. And we also bring in a big number of shells, a large number of shells from our collection to be displayed to the public. We estimate that we have around 4,000 shells now on display, which is probably 3 times as many as we had before. So if you come to the museum today, and some of you here have seen that, that's how the Great Hollow Shells look like. It's completely clean. We painted the walls. We painted that lower ceiling area nice, dark color. And there'll be a totally new design as you see in the next slide. So this is some of the original initial what they call schematics for the new Great Hollow Shells. There will be a central area. I'll explain each one of those later. But as you can see, the idea is to show as many shells as possible because that's what the Shell Museum is all about. We brought a very nice designer, someone who works actually her office is in Manhattan, and she does a lot of contemporary design for museums, especially art museums. So that's more or less the look that she's bringing into the new exhibitions, fresh, contemporary, clean lines. And I'll be I'll be showing you some of the. I think we have a pointer here. Oh, you all remember we come in through this door here. There's a little hall, and the way I'm going to be showing you, the new things is we'll be walking in a clockwise direction, starting here and coming through the area that used to be the shells of Sanibel-Captiva in the old Great Hollow shells. So as we walked in, and I hope you can see that it's a dark slide, but we have a couple of dioramas. We are bringing back to life the old Florida tree snails diorama that we had, a little smaller now, with the Ligus land snails from the Everglades. We're keeping the mangrove diorama. Actually, if you go to the museum today, you'll see the big empty room, with the nice white paint. And on a little corner, you'll see that because that's the only section of the old exhibits that we kept. And we decided to keep it because it's in very good shape and it was very well done. So there will be encased in a new cabinet, and we'll go from there. And then we have a new wharf diorama showing the zonation of marine species on a dock, on a piece of wood. Showing how the species are distributed from the lower area up to the top. So this is we continue in clockwise direction. And here we have one of our large areas, and it had to be, it only makes sense that we devote a lot of space to the seashells of Southwest Florida. We have a total of, I believe that this here is around 6 feet, and that's 19 feet long. We're not, evidently, we're not showing all the species, but we will have a nice representation showing variation of, within some of the most common local species. We also cover some of the local Southwest Florida habitats, such as sandy beaches, mangroves, mud flats, man-made structures, and so on. And evidently, the idea is we explain, we interpret, that's the word in museum lingo, we interpret the richness, the abundance of shells in Southwest Florida through that exhibit. This is one example of one of the 6 Southwest Florida habitats, and this one being the sandy bottom beaches, in which we do not have the shells there, we just have photos taken out of our Southwest Florida seashells guide. We'll have 9 species per habitat, and we do have an explanation for each habitat. And continuing that direction clockwise within the Great Hall, we have a very nice section where we explain the history of shell collecting in the U.S. And not a large text or anything, but just some of the key points mentioning some of the key players in our esteemed hobby. Evidently, being what it is, we couldn't leave Robert Tucker Abbott out of that, who was our founding director in the museum and probably the best shell person that ever existed. I mean, I really liked him. So we have the oyster reef diorama showing oysters and explaining why oyster reefs are so important in our environment, acting as nurseries for marine species, and also including some of the mollusks that live associated with oyster reefs. Can anyone here tell me the name of one of the species associated with oyster reefs? Oyster drills. We have crown conchs. We have all kinds of things that like to be either eating oysters or among oysters. And actually something that was really cool that we actually it was a suggestion from one of the designers, and I really embraced that right away, to have a map of collecting sites in Southwest Florida. And we did compile about 21 localities going from all the way from Boca Grande to Cape Romano, evidently including Sanibel-Captiva, Fort Myers Beach, all those places that you know. And that can be a nice resource for a visitor, someone who's here for a limited period of time that wants to go shell. We brought back the exhibit on Florida tree snails, the species known as Ligius fasciatus. We were able to remove each one of the shells from the old panel, and now they are being mounted on a new background. And by the way, I just want to let you know that all those shells are being mounted on a very elegant black, non-reflective background. And the black color enhances the color shells. It really brings out, makes the shell pop, if you will. We also show Caribbean species related to Ligus fasciatus. The Cuban polymeda, we have them, the beautiful, I forgot the common name of polymedas, but little colorful Cuban land tree snails and more Florida land snails. So there's a lot of space devoted to land snails. Oh, there are the polymedas. And this is a case that we had in the old exhibit, and it was a gift by a famous Cuban malacologist, Carlos de la Torre. And he gave this box to Dr. Bill Clench, who was an American malacologist from Harvard, who was Tucker Abbott's mentor back in the day, back in the 1940s. And we are preserving this. This is a box, like a shallow box, quote unquote, with cotton. And I would love to have received that gift. It's really cute. So there they are, the 56 forms of Florida tree snails they will be exhibiting. Now we'll continue now showing the bottom part of that great hall. I mean, this area here. And we have a section of the exhibits called extremes. And the extremes are extremes. They are things that are at the edge of existence, like deep sea species, micromollusks, extreme being in the middle, extremely small sizes, and so on. There are the micromollusks. We have Florida fossil shells nearby, when we also kept our own Florida fossil column. And some of you may remember that column where we showed 4 Florida fossil formations going from the oldest on the bottom to the most recent on top. And that column has a story because I was involved. I was actually the person who went and got all the shells that were glued onto those pieces of styrofoam, which it is what it is. They are 4 blocks of styrofoam with shells from each formation. So we were able to keep that, and it will be on display, back on display. And again, we'll have, evidently, we have Florida fossil shells. And there's a section of it in which the fossil species will be shown together with the recent relative of that species. We have an exhibit also on Ecphoras. Ecphora is a genus in the family Myricidids. It's an old murex, a fossil species, and no longer lives. A fossil genus, several species. And we had a display, and we were able to reuse all of them. And they're really striking shells, and I'm sure you'll like to see them when it's up. And finally, in that section, in the extremes, we have the extremely large shells, which are the world record size shells. that has been expanded from the old exhibit to include a couple of new world record size shells that we received as gifts, including a West Indian shank donated by Donald Dan, our beloved Donald Dan, and a world record ungulate whale trap we received from the late Jeff Oates, who was a member of the Shell Club. And in the micromollusk exhibit, we'll have a microscope, which is really cool. It's a very sturdy machine. It has a disc like a turntable, and so the viewer, the visitor can turn that and go from species to species. And that's more or less what it looks like. Well, up there we have the deep sea mollusk, and we have examples of sturdy looking deep sea mussels and some other bivalve, and one of the whale bone eating deep sea snails. Again, micromollusks. And we have a deep sea diorama that's being made by our mount maker. We have a person, a couple actually, who live in Gainesville, who are professional exhibit designers, and they're in charge of making all the mounts, because as you can imagine, each one of these shells has to have a mount that's custom made for that particular shell. Even if you have two Goliath points, if you make a mount for one, you cannot take that one out and put the other one, because the shells there's variation from one to the other. So we have to make mounts for each shell. So those are the deep sea mollusks. And I also want to take this example to show you how we are working with the designers and the mount maker. We have the dimensions of the panel on which the shells will go. Now imagine if this screen on which we're projecting the slides, if this is our exhibit, what we do at the museum, we cut a piece of paper for exactly that same size, and we lay all the shells on it. We take pictures of that. We arrange the shells before we have to put the shells before we take pictures, but we put all the shells the way we want. We number them, take pictures, and then we draw the outline for each one and write the number on paper, and we have a list that will be matched by the mount maker when he's doing that. And as you see, it's a lot. We'll have a lot of shells. We just scratch the surface. You see a little more now. So those are the deep sea mollusks. Our central area is where most of the shells will be concentrated. We'll have about 6 cases that are like vertical shelves, quote unquote, and on which we'll be displaying those many shells. And we have a central area that I'll explain. Those curved sections, they're like table format, and I'll explain what they are. Okay, so some of the central displays, that's what we call the beauty and diversity. It's just those are random assortments of shells. We call sculptures and colors, the one on the right, and the one on the left. Well, actually, no, I'm sorry, I'm misspeaking here. The one on the left is an exhibit on volutes. We have 6 families displayed. The one on the left are volutes here. And then the one on the right are carrier snails or carrier shell and murices. And half of it will be carrier snails, the other half will be murices. So we tried to select, the best specimens we had. We spent some money at the last couple of COA conventions buying shells, so that we have, the best amount your money can buy for, especially the carrier snails. We bought a collection last year at COA, and that's what's on display there. On top left, the beauty and diversity, we have the scallops. And then on top right, we have cone snails and cowries. It doesn't get any better than that. And then again, this is what I was referring initially. The two random selections are just striking shells or shells that have odd shapes or beautiful shapes. Time and evolution and sculptures and colors here. And those exhibits, they are 14 feet wide. So they're big displays. Okay, so this is what I was talking about when we do lay out this is kind of the behind the scenes, of the exhibit design. We pick up the shells and we lay down on pieces of paper that are the same size as the final panel onto which the shells will go. Those are the volutes. Oops. And those okay. We also have, and that's where I'm going to those curved tables. We have a section called global distribution, in which we try to show, we would be explaining why the different species are where they are in the world today. And that has a lot to do with the evolution of, the continents and the way the oceans were formed and all that. So we'll have an animation of Punjib showing the opening of the seafloor spreading and the separation of continents that started about 200 million years ago, roughly speaking. We also have a section that became one of my favorites, if not my favorite, of the whole Great Hall, in which we show species pairs on each side of the Isthmus of Panama of Central America. The Isthmus of Panama is, from a geological standpoint, is a very young feature. Way back, there was only, the whole thing was open. There was no land separating the Eastern Pacific from the Western Atlantic. And as that part of the seafloor sold up there, through plate tectonics, movement of plates that collided, forming that land mass. What used to be one species became separated into two daughter species. So you have, they became isolated, they evolved differently on each side of the Isthmus of Panama. And we have an exhibit that shows those pairs of species. Rick Beth just showed one of them. I think we can assume that the Galeadas and Goliaths are, they are the descendants of a common ancestor that lived prior to, the formation of the Isthmus of Panama. So we'll be showing, I believe, 26 pairs of such species in one of those two exhibits. The one on top shows, it's more or less a random display showing the distribution of global species. And the one on the bottom is where I was talking about my quote-unquote favorite one, where we show on one side of that curve, you see there is a dotted line. On top of the dotted line are the Western Atlantic species. Below the dotted line are the Eastern Pacific's counterparts, or corresponding species, beginning with relatively small Murexes and ending with the horse conch and its sister species, which is it's called Profusus princeps, or the prince horse conch, which looks very much like it. Yes.
In the aerial picture, how many tables are underneath there?
Well, those pictures are deposits, and those pictures were done by Chris With, who works in the museum, was very talented. He works with me in collections, has time. And so I'll take care of it. So he just stood up on a chair and took a bunch of pictures and pasted them together. So that's what we like to see, cool action.
It's correct. A lot of tables.
Yeah, those are long. Yeah, we have this here, the brown table is 6 foot long, 6 feet long. So we had to put, kind of, and finally we're done with that step. So the collection area can go back to be, we have a couple of people coming back to help, and because so up to now, I mean, we've been really, really busy with that. And so that's both me there with, you know, placing the shelves and making replacements and thinking about it and all, which is a lot of fun when you think of it. Uh, so we continue onto that sector here. There are two sections that I won't go in depth, but one of them is, which is really cool. Actually, this one I'll go in a little more in depth, but shells in history and culture. And there's so much. I mean, this is like they write books and books about how the roles that shells play in art and history, architecture. We have the list there: currency and economy, decorative arts, food, shells in medicine, uh, music, and so on. So same style. You notice that the cool thing about this new Great Hall is that there will be a constant, like the style is the same throughout the exhibits. And in the past, because of the way we started, it was a mishmash of different styles, different fabricators, and so on. So we have a cool section on the mollusks as food. We couldn't avoid that. It's such a fascinating topic. Mollusks in medicine. We have a little section devoted to shell oil, which is very interesting because shell oil started, the people who started shell oil in the UK, they started as shell dealers. And then they really shifted big time to become carriers of oil from the Red Sea, from the Arab countries to the West. But they kept their interest in shells. And they also named all the tankers, all the gigantic ships they owned. They named them after mollusk genera like Donax, Purex, and so on. And some of their products were named after marine animals, like there's a Rotella oil that's named after one of the marine microorganisms and so on. Currency, you all know about cowries and tusk shells as currency and wampum here in America. In the shell medicine, we pay a tribute to Dr. Toto Oliveira, who's a very nice guy, and who was the man who discovered the pathways of conus or cons neotoxins and how they act. And by finding that, he was able to develop a model for pig killing drugs. We actually be exhibiting a couple of boxes of Leal, which is a painkiller that's used in terminal diseases that doesn't cause habituation and it's a great substitute for morphine and things like that. It's kind of not a nice subject, but it's a great medication. We go back to the Calusa, displaying some of the artifacts that we have on loan from the Florida Museum of Natural History. We have some touchable tools there on here. And we also cover the topic of spirituality, which is kind of sort of a synonym to religion. The use of shells and the significance of shells in human spirituality and what they meant to different people. Spanning many, many cultures, and as you know, it is a cool topic. We do have a model, not a model, a sculpture that was donated to us by a famous malacologist, Gene Cohn, and who called me one day and said, "I have this redwood sculpture here that it depicts the birth of humankind as seen by the Haida, who are a or used to be a Pacific Northwest people. And according to them, all of us humans started getting out of a gigantic clamshell that was opened by a raven. So that's the raven opening the clamshell, and inside we have all the little humans waiting, eagerly waiting to come out. Shells as tools in utility, how shells have been used by different cultures as tools, and including the beautiful Polynesian stick chart there on the bottom. I don't know if you can see it. Those images are small, I apologize. But the stick charts are navigational maps designed by the Polynesians way back. And they would, on those maps made of bamboo, they would show waves movement, they would show wind patterns, and the islands that they wanted to depict were represented by cowrie shells. So this is a classic depiction of the Marshall Islands, with the largest island symbolized by a map cowrie. That's one of the illustrations we'll be showing the Calusa here on Pine Island. And you can see a young man throwing the shells after they remove the animal for eating. And that's the foundation of the shell mounds as we know them today. They're very common in this part of Florida. A little more. We have a section that will talk about climate. I'll talk about that a little later. Climate changes and the environment. But let's stay here with history and culture. And I hope, is there sound here? If I play? So I'll try to play a little, we'll be playing this to the public. You can go into a little area where you can hear a guy playing one of the Eastern Pacific flutes, actually Strombus galliardus, or the ton of Strombus galliardus. I still go back to Strombus. Adornment. In the adornment section, we have to acknowledge the big help that Joyce Matthews, most of you know Joyce. Joyce has devoted a lot of time to study and research the use of the business of pen shells in fashion, in how the business of pen shells have been used for weaving fine silk-like gloves and some adornments. And we actually have a little bracelet that was woven by Joyce in that exhibit, which is really cool. And evidently, we do have the noble pen shell on display that also were donated by Joyce, the specimen we display. This is the oldest form of ornament ever found. Again, I think it dates back like 45,000 years. Found in the Eastern Mediterranean, and it consists of pieces of one of the mud snail shells. I think is the Globos nasa. We don't have that, but we have a nice picture and explain in the adornment section. Some of the tusk shells used by the Pacific Northwest people. A lion's paw in modern jewelry. It's actually pieces of, going back. Pieces of turquoise stone onto a shell of a lion's paw. Yeah, pearls. We talk about pearls and we show some examples. There will be actually a screen where you can see a show of well-known people wearing pearls, from Vermeer's famous painting. Audrey Hepburn. I was pulling my memory here, and then Harry Styles. As a man using pearls, which is not common, but he's bringing that back, and cowries. And this is where I hope we can hear that. I think we can play that. Can you go back and see if you, yeah. I don't know if you have volume. But this is the same shell that Dr. Bat will show the Eastern Pacific Strombus galliata, Titanic Strombus galliata. And the cool thing is that we had a model, we had a replica made in Peru that we contracted with someone who made a replica of that trumpet. And I forgot to mention that, but some of you know that shells were used and are still used as musical instruments. Including in modern times, there's a famous jazz musician, Steve Turry, who used to play with the band of Saturday Night Live back in the day, back in the 80s. And he has CDs and LPs of himself playing different species. And we'll be showing that too. Going from small conchs to, big whelks.
Is that Steve Drury?
I'm sorry? Yeah, Steve Turry. So notice he puts his hand in the knob, the water reads the pitch. Thank you. Great. Another nice section will be shells in architecture. Showing the influence of that shell, the designs one sees in shells can serve as sources of inspiration for design of buildings and building ornaments. Shells in decorative art, where we brought some of the materials we had in the old exhibits, including the beautiful Korean chest cabinet that was donated by Cecilia Abbott, the widow Tucker. In the art section, we cover different aspects of art, including literary arts, where we talk about Mrs. Lindbergh in her famous book, Gift from the Sea, and the Sailor's Valentine, which is, we couldn't leave out. And we are including several of our existing Sailor's Valentines that museum had. One Sailor's Valentine that was not an exhibit that we received maybe about 3 years ago. That's this oldest Sailor's Valentine we have. It dates from the 1820s, and it's very rough looking. When you look at it, it's how ugly, but it's not that. It's that the age, and it has a lot of provenance. It was one captain that made it actually. Unlike the other ones were made by islanders in Seoul. This was done by a ship captain, British ship captain, who brought it back to England, and then went from hand to hand, and we ended up getting it, which was great. We also have a gigantic, a very large Sailor's Valentine donated by Hatsue Imura, who is famous here with the Sanibel Shell Show. She comes every year with her students. And when she heard that we were looking for, one nice large piece, she said, "Well, I'll make one and donate it." And not only she did that, she sent it. She paid for the shipping, which was probably like a small fortune. And in the process of shipping that, a couple of shells were dislodged. And we communicated by email, and she said, "Did it arrive okay?" I said, "Well, a couple." I'll be there in March for the shell show. This is the past March 2024. She came to the shell show and spent like an afternoon in the museum, touching up. Oh, maybe I can do this a little bit. So it's, not only she did all that, but she did all that. So if you see her, thank her on behalf of everyone. I mean, it's a great gift. And we got one also from David Rhines. which is really spectacular. It's a smaller piece, but very, very delicate with little white butterflies, just top notch. There they are. Yeah, this is Hatsui's, and this is Dave Wright. The shells in architecture, we talk about different buildings, and there's this famous mosque, I can't remember exactly where, and I'll have to go back and look, and we associate those structures, those buildings, with particular shells that in some cases we know that they were the source of inspiration because the person actually wrote that down. Or in some cases we assume that it could have been, that shell that inspired the designer, the architect. One that's unquestionable is the Sydney Opera House, that apparently is inspired on a shell that was actually today in the silent auction, the cockscomb oyster, Lopha Christagalli, with those kind of overlapping, sections and all that. The Sydney Opera House with a turban. I mean, I'm so sorry. Guggenheim. Yeah, I don't know what I have in mind. In New York City. And it looks more like a shell inside, like with the spiral going up. And there you go. Yeah, this telescopion and this beautiful mosque somewhere in the Middle East. We also comment on the first finding of a shell that served as the canvas for a possible artwork. This very old clam with etchings found somewhere also in the Middle East, in the, I think, Eastern Mediterranean area. A famous still life by Adam Corte. And what cool thing is that we researched that, and we found all the shells that will go. So we have a photo of the painting, and under it we have all the different species that are included in that painting. Georgia O'Keeffe with a moon snail, Ed Weston with a spider conch, famous photographer, a famous painter. And I mentioned Anne Morrow Lindbergh and her book. We have to pay a tribute to her because she was part-time local on Captiva. Her cottage no longer exists, but her cottage used to be on the corner where Captiva Drive leaves the beach and turns where the Jensen Beach place is. Her cottage was right there on the corner. And last but not least, we have a section on conservation and environment to raise some awareness of some of the, the situations that are on today, such as invasive species, the loss of habitats, climate change, ocean acidification, and general water quality in Southwest Florida. And then we talk about positive initiatives, not to be only, looking at the dark side of things, but also some glimpses of hope and what you can do to make a difference. So we talk about invasive species, and the first one that comes to mind is the zebra mussel, and how it came from, the Eastern Europe at some point in the ballast water ships, and quickly spread throughout the Great Lakes, the upper Mississippi basin. And there are very few American states that don't have a presence of that invasive species. Again, water quality, that's a classic image of Sanibel's lighthouse area showing the water release, carrying, all the, what you don't want to see coming to the ocean environment, to the beach environment. Nutrients, fertilizers, and bad things. Blue-green algae in Cape Coral, which is also a byproduct of excess loads of nutrients in fresh water. The effect of hurricanes as a result of climate change, ocean acidification, and how it affects the shells of mollusks, and the positive movements that go on. And this is showing the effort led by SCCF and to some extent Florida Gulf Coast University in replenishing the oyster beds, which are really needed in our area, especially in the Bay areas. The work done by Megan Davis, who is also one of the trustees with the Bailey Matthews National Shell Museum, an aquarium board. And the work she's doing in the Caribbean, trying to keep the populations of the queen conch thriving. And that's that. I just want to give you a before you ask questions, I want to answer one question right away off the bat. Someone's gonna ask me, when is this all going to be finished? So that's a tough one. I mean, we've done most of the in-house work, the design, the selection of shells. The shells are being mounted in Gainesville by the couple I referred to. There is a group doing fabricating the cabinets, the cases in Manhattan, in New York City, and they will be shipped here. So we anticipate that it's difficult to put a date on it, but I assume that between 2 or 3 months ahead. Yeah, we could. I mean, maybe, I don't know. I know you're recording that, so it may be. But we have to be, I mean, it's not easy when you think about that whole great hall, how many exhibits we have, how many exhibits we'll have now, and how much was done. I forgot to mention when I opened my presentation that this presentation, I couldn't do, it's not my presentation. This is mostly Sam's presentation in the sense that he's the one that really pushed very hard for all this to happen. And his vision of having a shell museum displaying a lot of shells made me very happy because it's what we should be. We should be, we have a great living gallery with beautiful animals, and to complement that, we have the non-living section where we explain, we show history, we show diversity and the beauty of shells. Yes, Heidi.
Do you think, Jose, you would have done very similar to your vision, Sam's vision, if there'd never been any, because you said you were thinking about it, or would you have some stuff?
I understand your question. What Libby is asking is that if there weren't a hurricane, if this would come out the way this is coming out, probably not. It's very unlikely that. I think the push for survival. I mean, when you think of it, not survival of individual people, but survival of an institution. Is a very to me at least, and I know it is to Sam too. I mean, he's been at the museum not even 4 years, but he's really, really committed. You could see by his actions after the storms. I mean, one storm. I mean, he got blasted. I mean, we got blasted, but he being at the helm, the brunt of it. But I think that it is. I think he's probably better thanks to Hurricane Ian. I mean, maybe I'm saying something really silly here, but yes.
My question is about shells that were in the exhibit, and you said we take this. Did you lose shells, or was it just because of the wind and the rain and all that, but you were able to keep all the shells, not lose?
Yeah. Well, the question that's being asked is, given that I mentioned earlier that we could reuse some of the shells that were in the old exhibits, whether we lost many or any, and the answer, yes, we did. There were some shells that, especially we had shells, for instance, you know what winged oysters are? Local shell. We, we had growth series of winged oysters in the local exhibit, seashells of Sanibel-Captiva, that we attempted to remove them, and all of them broke because they were glued with epoxy. And epoxy is very strong, and the shells are very fragile. So we lost some, but by and large, on the Ligos, we never lost any. And the Ligos are really delicate.
Globe.
Yes, the globe. When we didn't, some of the shells that were in the globe, there was the central exhibit in the old Great Hall that had the globe and then the different regions, different geographic regions like Japanese region, South Africa, and all that. A lot of those shells, they had faded and they were dusty, and we didn't want to reuse them. So we brought a lot of shells from the collection, and we're keeping a good record of what went in the collection. So one day, if you want to take them back, you can put them back in the collection. Any more questions? Well, thanks so much for your kind attention. And well, I also want to thank everyone who has helped in the process, either by volunteering or helped financially, bring this back to life. Thank you.
Jose, I think we have a few more. Did you have a question? Then we have questions for people on Zoom.
So,
Yeah.
This, the squid. There's giant squid.
The giant squid.
My friend.
oh, the giant squid. Libby Graham is asking, where is the old giant squid? I have to repeat the question. Where is the old giant squid? Well, the old giant squid in the old days was in a place nobody could see it. It was very high on the ceiling of the Great Hall shells, and now it is prominently displayed at the very entrance of the museum. And as you walk in, you can see it. But better yet, if you're on the second floor, the mezzanine of the second floor, it's high level. So it's in a very special place. Thanks for asking that.
Cool. And let's see, Barb, do we have any questions from anyone on Zoom?
We do have one question, and we have a lot of appreciation for your presentation. So thank you for that, Dr. Leal. We have one question, and that is, how many shells in the museum and how many will be on display?
Well, yeah, I don't need to repeat it because there's some people are listening to that. Well, how many shells in the museum? We don't have we do not have a precise number, but we do have a number of lots, and we have about 135,000 lots, and average about 5 shells per lot. And so you multiply 135,000 by 5, it's almost 700,000, but probably 600,000 individual shells. Now, in the exhibits, we estimate that we have probably anywhere between 3,000 and 4,000 shells, which is much, much more than we used to have.
Great, thank you so much. That's all from us other than appreciation.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so